All right. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and welcome. Welcome, and thank you for joining the Research Policy and Impact Center's Town Hall meeting under the umbrella of the National Institute of Minority Economic Development. The Research Policy and Impact Center seeks to bring you informative information in the areas of health, housing, small business, and of course, education. Today, in our town hall meeting, we're going to focus on leadership and civic engagement. What is civic engagement? Who are the organizations out there that are on the ground, doing the work, making a difference? We have some amazing panelists, 3 amazing panelists with you here today. And we are going to do a round robin with them so that they can tell you who they are, what roles they have at their organization, the name of their organization, and also their why they do this amazing but difficult work. Who would like to start us off out of the panelists today?
I can go first since I'm off mute.
Thank you, Chantal.
Good morning, everyone. I am Chantal Stevens, and I'm the Executive Director for the ACLU of North Carolina. The ACLU of North Carolina, what we do is that we've been here, first of all, for over 50 years, so since 1965. And our work happens in North Carolina's courts, in our legislature, and in communities to root out policies and practices that threaten people's civil liberties. And so we often work very proudly to amplify the voices of North Carolinian residents, North Carolinians who are often thrust to the sidelines because of race, because of income, gender identity, sexual orientation, immigrant status, a person's current or past incarceration. And oftentimes these are people who've inherited systems that were neither created by them nor for them. And so that's really where our work focuses. And so why I do this work is because I feel like I fall into a lot of these categories. I'm a Black woman. I am an immigrant to this country. And this is important to me to make sure that people's rights are protected. I come from a family where fighting for the underdog is in my blood. My dad did that for a very long time. I'm from Antigua, and so he was involved in a lot of the Pan-African movements in Antigua and the independence movement. And so his children inherited a lot of those, I say it's in our genes, right? And so this is work that I have always done in different ways. So for a long time, I worked in education, but primarily with students of color. So again, with those students who've not had access and opportunity. And so it is in my blood, it is why I do this work. And it's important to me to make the systemic changes to make sure that people who look like me, people who are often left out of the conversation, have a voice.
Thank you so much, Chantal. And Leah?
Yeah, I'm happy to go next. Hi, good morning, everybody. Checking to make sure it's still morning. I am Dr. Leah Bouchard. I'm the Director of Research and Data Management at the North Carolina Rural Center. It is a pleasure to be with all of you today. The North Carolina Rural Center serves our 78 rural counties in North Carolina. So North Carolina has 100 total counties, and 78 of those are classified as rural. So we support rural counties in economic development through a holistic lens. So we look at health, we look at the workforce, we look at housing and infrastructure, all to make sure that the rural people in places of North Carolina have the opportunity to thrive. My why is born, I think many of our whys are probably born of frustration. And so I was born in rural North Carolina. I was raised in rural North Carolina in Caldwell County, and spent a lot of time as a rural youth feeling very invisible in the political system and in the economic system, and trying to make sure that my voice was heard. Felt like I couldn't quite scream loud enough. And so by the time I was able to get to a point where I felt like I was at the tables I wanted to be at, I realized that that was rare for someone coming from my background of being a rural youth, coming from a working class family, to be able to sit at those tables. And so I like to do this work to ensure that all the voices are heard, and to make sure that we're building up these communities and the young people in these communities to really drive our future and make sure that as communities and as society, we have the next generation ready to go when it comes to supporting our community development. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with y'all.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Leah. And Marques?
Yeah. So I'm Marques Thompson. I am the organizing director for Democracy North Carolina. We're celebrating 30 years this year, so super excited to be here today. Thank you for having me. Democracy North Carolina is a nonprofit that fights for voting rights all across North Carolina. So we do a lot of the policy work kind of in the background. So, we have the ability in North Carolina to do same day registration where you go to the polls, and if you're not registered, you can register today during early voting. Well, that's something that Democracy North Carolina have been fighting for years, and now we have it. So those are some of the things we do. For example, the early voting plans that allow you to vote on Saturday or Sunday or whatever. We have advocates and volunteers that go into the county boards of elections and advocate for those hours and say, hey, we want ours to be like this so that it will help the most people to be able to vote. So we're kind of in the background of voting rights and that kind of thing. So that's the work that we did at DMNC. And my why. So I come from a very spiritual background. And so I was very focused as a young man of helping people to, get into heaven, know the Lord. That's my background from an individual standpoint. But one thing, I wanted to help people to improve their lives. And one thing you learn as you get older is that policies really affect people's lives. Like there's a lot that you can do on an individual basis, but there's a lot that's acting upon an individual that they can't control. That's on the next level. That's government, that's policy. And so I wanted to be able to help more people, and I realized that was the way to do it. And our democracy affects every issue. So whatever the issue that I wanted to help someone, whether it be housing or whatever, transportation or whatever, that their democracy, their interface with their democracy would determine whether or not that government or that institution is working for them or not. And so I realized that to help the most people, I have to help our democracy work for the most people. And so that's why I do what I do.
Excellent. Thank you, Marques. That's awesome. Well, the way we're going to handle this now is we're going to just go ahead and deep dive into a round of a series of questions that each panelist would be able to have the opportunity to address from their perspective in their organization. So speaking of the ballot box, for centuries, it's become the cornerstone of healthy democracies. It's the place where you go to exercise our civic duty, a place where we shape rules, values, the norms where we live and work. Access to voting booths is a human right that we're still fighting for in a lot of communities. But the civic engagement, broadly understood, is so much more than just casting a vote. It's about getting your voice heard. It's about listening to others. It's about expressing beliefs on the ground in the public, and not just on paper. So it's about participating meaningfully in issues that we all have a stake in. How is your organization, through programming and or leadership, forging new paths for civic engagement as you propose opportunity of power and promise to the community? And anyone can start. We won't completely start with the first person all the time. So I'll let you guys jump in as you go.
I'm happy to start. So at the North Carolina Rural Center, we have a long history of really pushing for leadership development in our communities, and that civic engagement is a key part of that. So we have a number of programs that really strive to develop our leaders, a diverse pool of leaders who are equipped with the knowledge to then go into their communities and do good work in the economy and do good work politically. We have a civic engagement module in our leadership trainings, and so we make sure that that is a critical component. And that is often coupled also with a racial equity module and modules on the research and data. So people are equipped with the information they need to make change and make decisions in their communities. We also have an incredible advocacy team. Brandy Bynum-Dawson is here in the crowd today, and she was the fearless leader of that for a long time and is now the Senior Director of Policy Research and Innovation for us. And that advocacy team works very hard to convene and facilitate across the state. They have an entire network of advocates that are made up of community members who are interested in specific issues, that have the opportunity to have their voice heard and to speak to the General Assembly through us in a lot of ways. And so we create that opportunity for them and facilitate their voice being heard down on Jones Street.
Awesome. Thank you, Leah. Marques, how is your organization doing these types of things? I know you addressed a few things that you all do as far as getting people out to vote. And I know that you are on the ground 100% of the time. So what are you doing over at Democracy NC to forge this type of promise and power to the community?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's, as you say, being on the ground is something that we do all the time as far as rising up leaders. So part of organizing is getting people to understand the power that they have within their community. And that is the leadership development piece of letting people know that you are in your community have a voice, and helping people to discover that voice, develop that voice, and then use it effectively for their community. So so first, forging new paths is pretty much what we do on a daily basis, helping individuals again to find their power and find their communities and their community's power. And when you think about just through policies that we do, we try to open up opportunities, and this is voting specific, so it's not civic engagement, but just the ability to vote online is something that we have not vote online, I'm sorry, but register online is something that we have been fighting for years. And then the pandemic came and it became very apparent that yes, we need to. So working with the State Board of Elections and the DMV, we allow people now to register to vote online if you have a driver's license. So this is a new opportunity that has just opened up in the recent years. But every cycle, we are looking for new people and new ways to reach people. So, in the past, you might have probably been a part of something like a phone bank or a canvas where you literally get people in a room and you're calling people to let them know about things. But now we do relational voting, or relational work where we teach people how to talk to their neighbors about the voting process and educate one another about what's happening in the community. And we use texting, and so it's some of the old tactics of building relationships and using those relationships to foster civic engagement and civic discussion, but just using new tools to do that old work of conversation. So those are some of the things that we're doing now and working on for the future.
Yes, and as you can see, I am wearing my I voted early sticker, so I'm wearing it proudly today. But I was very impressed to see all of the new technology when I went to all the different things that now have merged together to help get the information out there and to get people excited about civic engagement and getting out there and voting and doing what it takes to make a difference in their communities. Chantal, would you like to address the question as well?
Sure. So at the ACLU of North Carolina, we have 6 priority areas that we focus on. They're fighting for racial justice, transforming the criminal legal system, working for reproductive justice, advancing LGBTQIA equality, protecting immigrants' rights, and of course, ensuring voting rights. So within those 6 buckets, there's always some attack, right, in our state. And so our strategies, our engagement opportunities aren't static. They will change from year to year depending on the attack at that moment. And so a couple of current engagement opportunities I would lift up then would be working on this Freedom Summer Unlock the Vote campaign. So together with coalitions, we are coordinating a number of mobilization and engagement events really to address this issue that directly impacts folks who have been formerly incarcerated. And so you all might remember that earlier this year in CSI v. Moore, that was a case that Forward Justice, our partners at Forward Justice won, and it unlocked the vote of 55,000 people who were previously ineligible to vote. And so part of our work in this coalition is to lift up and build awareness around that. So we're helping to organize and implement statewide strategies and plans. There are regional ambassadors, many of whom are formerly incarcerated themselves. So we're making sure that we compensate those people. They're out there, they are getting paid to do this labor, right? It's not just asking them to work for free. And so we've been doing lots of events in partnership with coalition members to get people registered and aware, first of all, aware that they can vote, and then registered to do that. So that's a big one. Another one I'll talk about briefly is, the whole idea of sitting on a jury, right? That is another cornerstone activity of citizenship. And we're working right now on building public awareness around death penalty, focused primarily on the racial and gender disparities that are present when requiring potential jurors to certify ahead of time, before hearing evidence, right, that they are willing to sentence someone to death. So we think that we have to educate the public and then invite them to, show solidarity with our campaign, with the messaging, in the hope that we can shift the tone of the death penalty trials in North Carolina. And then the last activity in terms of civic engagement that I'll talk about right now is our work to protect what we consider to be fundamental rights to bodily autonomy. Right after the Dobbs decision came out this past summer, ACLU North Carolina and ACLU at large voiced its disagreement with the Supreme Court's ruling to strip away the right to abortion. And so we've been partnering with reproductive rights organizations in myriad ways right here in our state. For example, Planned Parenthood South Atlantic, Sister Song, Carolina Abortion Fund. And we've done things like created an abortion toolkit that's available on our website to provide a comprehensive collection of information, resources, action items on how to access abortion care in North Carolina. And then we've done a few events to train folks, so train the trainer type events to teach people how to talk about abortion. So we've done those through house parties. And so to change the stigma around abortion care and how to engage people around that type of conversation. So that's some of what we've done recently.
All three great organizations and amazing work that's being done on the daily basis that you get to hear about today just on the webinar, but these guys are really in the trenches doing the work on a daily basis. So I encourage all of you to, if you're not already involved, but to look up the organizations that you're hearing from today, see what's happening on a daily basis and see how you can get involved as well. So in a national survey, when people were asked, where do they want to learn and what do they want to learn more about when concerning our democracy? The majority of the answers were all about deep diving into more local government positions and understanding their powers. We know that civic engagement in our rural communities is a key part of keeping our officials accountable to us. We also know our communities need them to make our community better for all. But we know that certain parts of the government, when issues come up, we are not all educated enough to address the issues as they are. Can you address some local and state government positions for which major issues are being addressed in the upcoming elections and equip our attendees by diving deeper into policies and issues surrounding these offices that will directly impact our rural communities a little more? And I know, Leah, you are very engaged in the rural area, being at the Rural Center. Can you start us off with addressing some of these directly, the way they are impacting our rural areas a little more directly?
Absolutely. When it comes to a deep dive into policies and positions, I am the director of research. So I think Chantal and Marques probably are the better experts for that answer to answer that question. But I can speak broadly to the issues that are facing rural North Carolina and why it matters to get rural voters engaged in this policy work. A lot of the issues that are affecting rural North Carolina are affecting the whole state, but are disproportionately kind of centered in those 78 counties. So things like broadband access, which is digital equity and access, which includes affordability to that broadband and to these digital resources. Issues like affordable housing, which have large impacts social justice wise, but also it's hard to bring workers and people into a new community when there's not an affordable place for them to live. So making sure they have safe, affordable housing. We've done a lot of work around Medicaid expansion, and we know that is something that rural North Carolinians are really passionate about receiving. The majority of the people who are uninsured are in rural North Carolina, and they would benefit greatly from that being open. Coupled with that is different healthcare access. There are a lot of medical shortage areas that are in rural North Carolina, so making sure that there's access to healthcare and resources. We've seen 11 hospital closures since 2005 in rural areas, and so those are the issues that are really close to the heart of rural voters. A lot of the issues with getting rural voting, rural civic engagement really boils down to that issue of broadband and digital equity. So a lot of the great work that Marques's organization has done around being able to do online registration and having a really centralized way of registering to vote and voting absentee, things like that. It's difficult for people who don't have access to internet to be able to engage with those tools and those resources, which unfortunately is mostly rural people. There's also kind of a gap in being able to access information about policies, about the candidates when you don't have stable access to internet, especially since most of that information is on the internet. I mean, I still get the pamphlets in the mail from candidates. I'm sure you all do too, but the majority of that information has swung to the internet. So those are the issues that are close to the rural voters, and also why it's important to make sure that we're doing outreach and policy information that is not purely digital for our rural voters.
I don't mind jumping in and maybe talking about some of the positions that affects exactly the same types of thing that Leah just talked about, right? Like very often people get excited around the federal races, the big races, but not those down ballot races that have an impact on day-to-day life. So for instance, county clerk, right? Your county clerk is who runs the day-to-day operations for registration and voting in many states. They can be the ones who are responsible for training election officials, counting those election results, mailing those absentee ballots. So if you don't have trustworthy people in those roles, just imagine the travesty, right? Think of your Board of Education, right? Your Board of Education, they're the ones that are passing policies that either protect or don't protect, for instance, LGBTQ students from harassment, bullying, for instance. They're the ones who have the ability to fight back against book bans, right? They're the ones who set rules around restricting conversations about race, sexual orientation, and just actual historical information in the classrooms. So those seats are very important too. If we think about district attorneys, they are some of the most powerful actors in our criminal legal system because they're the ones who have the power to decide what crime a person is charged with, right? They can bring charges against people accused of violating unjust laws. They can decline to prosecute crimes that disproportionately impact marginalized communities. So there's a number of things that district attorneys can do. If you think about, for instance, even Board of Commissioners, county laws and policies that are determined by other federal or state laws can be determined, that are not determined, by other federal and state laws can be determined by your Board of Commissioners. And they're the ones who have the power to decide how to implement state and federal laws. So those can be things like setting your tax rate for your county, regulating how land is used, deciding on the budget for the county. They also operate things like health centers, libraries, school systems, all of the things that affect our civil liberties. So it's really important to know who some of those players are and pay attention to those down ballot races. That's just a few that I'll mention.
Thank you, Chantal.
Yeah, you really mentioned the one that I was really going to key on it, which was the district attorneys. You think about, we talk about the issues, one of the most salient issues that has been on people's minds is the criminal justice system and how it affects Black and brown people. And that is, a lot of that is determined by your district attorney. But also, so just to mention the ones that you really went hyper local, but even on the state level and the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court, these are things that really affect your life. So we're going, when you think about civic engagement and our democracy, you think about gerrymandering issues like that. where those were decided by the state Supreme Court recently. You know, the landmark decision really helped North Carolina and the political gerrymander. So that's the thing. You think about a judge, you know, or a justice, you know, that might be something that's not on people's radar, but it really affects you here in North Carolina. But even the state legislature, you talk about the criminal justice system, where the people writing the laws is the legislature. And so those are your state representatives, your state senators. Again, people a lot of times don't know who they are. You mentioned the budget is written by them. Healthcare. So the fact that we still don't have healthcare expansion in North Carolina, that's because of the General Assembly or the legislature. So the government, I mean, one thing that the pandemic made really clear, hopefully, is that who your local leaders are matters in your life. When you see something like a pandemic and how it's handled, it really brings it to the fore. So yeah, all of those issues of healthcare, criminal justice, the economy is all determined by your state legislature. The health of the democracy a lot of times is going to depend on the state Supreme Court. So those are very important. We say justice is on the ballot. So, you know, these are just issues that people get to decide this election.
Thank you so much for that excellent round robin of responses there. Our so politicalization, political polarization is as we know it, is damaging the health of our American democracy, and our young people know nothing other than a weakening democracy, unable to substantially address problems. Our government is gridlocked. Our citizenry is usually divided across parties and cultural lines, prohibiting us from reaching solutions that are facing our country. And so we wanted to kind of address there's a lot of college students that are on the call, and some that are I'm letting in even as of now, if we speak from NCCU, UNCG. How can young people, and they're coming in as we speak, so you have to excuse me because I'm constantly hitting the admit button. But for our young people, how can young people address problems that may threaten our democracy through constructive political engagement, ideally in their community immediately, leading up to elections and throughout the year? And I'll say that once again, just for everyone, as I've been stuttering a little bit trying to get through. But how can young people address problems that may threaten our democracy through constructive political engagement, ideally in their community immediately, leading up to elections and throughout the year?
So if I could open up with this one, because I really was thinking about and I wanted to kind of ground us with two of the problems that are facing our democracy, as you mentioned, and why young people would be critical with it. So one thing, I recently spoke to some students at ECU, and we were talking about people are starting to lose confidence in our election as far as the integrity of our elections, right? And people have literally been challenging whether or not, you know, the elections are rigged and that kind of thing. So one way young people can help us is by learning about how the physical election process works. There are things happening. So when there's an election, there's X's and O's, there are procedures that make sure that your ballot is safe, that it can't be tampered with, that it's going to be counted. And there are procedures in place to guarantee that. And North Carolina does an excellent job with their elections, right? So I just really had to go through just the general, you know, how that works, the X's and O's, the physical process, how machines count the ballots, that kind of thing, you know. And then there's a process afterwards where called canvass, where the election results are certified. And so letting people know that you have access to this. This is an open meeting. You can come, you can see, you can talk to the election officials. It's all open for you, right? So there's no mystery. There's nothing happening behind closed doors. You have access to your democracy, and your democracy is safe. So that's one thing that we can encourage, and not just young people, but all people, but especially young people. As you say, you know, if you're a younger person, you're being raised in this environment where these things have been challenged for as long as you can remember. You know, was probably some of your early memories in politics or your elections being challenged. So that's one thing, a big problem that we have, and a big solution that young people can play a role in learning about that procedure, and then letting their friends know that aren't as civically engaged, aren't as interested, just to let them know, hey, I've looked at this, I've checked that out, because that voice from a peer carries more weight than, someone like me talking or whatever. So let them do the research and then tell their friends about it. That's one thing I can do. Another thing, a problem that affects our democracy is gerrymandering, a real bad threat that we consistently feel. And again, we talked about the Supreme Court and the work that the ways that the Supreme Court has helped us in this issue. But it can, if people have the belief, and especially young people, that their vote doesn't count, that the maps have been gerrymandered to the point that it doesn't matter whether I vote or not, that my vote isn't going to be able to change things, then that can be discouraging. So again, doing research, if we can help people to know that even now, our maps right now are better than what they're nothing's perfect, but they're better than what some would have them to be. So we need to let them know that. And your vote does count. I mean, there are going to be elections that are going to be decided by hundreds or in thousands of votes, very small margins in the state. And so every vote does count. And that even if the gerrymander has not been effective right now, as far as the maps have been redrawn to be less gerrymandered. But even in situations where it might seem hopeless because of historical low turnout numbers, every race, if people turn out, I don't care how bad that you gerrymander, if you get enough people to turn out, you can still affect the election. And so talking to your friends, talking to your neighbors, that still is a valid way to affect our election. And it's very, very hard for people to have a system that will overcome the power of the people. So just to continue to give people hope that their voice will count in our democracy.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Marques.
I think Mark has raised some really good points. Like, young people are disillusioned and they're feeling, disconnected from the process. I think recently Politico reported that here in North Carolina, young voters were not showing up to vote early in this election as intently as they did in 2020. And I think as of October 26, voters who were under the age of 30, only 5.4% of those were people under the age of 30 who cast ballots so far, compared to 16.5% who voted early and absentee in 2020. So this really, really matters, because as Marques was alluding to, we have super tight US Senate races, state legislative races, North Carolina Supreme Court races, and these are races that could shift the balance of power in our state in negative ways, right? The Supreme Court could be the last line of defense on gerrymandered maps, on abortion rights. The legislature becoming supermajority GOP could mean a complete irrelevance to Governor Cooper's veto power. So young people do need to get to the ballot box, because it really only advantages those who are looking to challenge their civil liberties for them not to show up. And I know that, and we all know, right, that a few votes can make a hell of a difference. If we just look at Chief Justice Beasley's race when she ran for Supreme Court Justice 2 years ago now, 2020, she lost that race by 400 votes.
Yeah.
So if you think about the 55,000 people who've had their voting rights restored, and then you think about all the young people who are feeling disillusioned, like, it really makes a difference. Like, even though the maps have been gerrymandered, if people get out and actually vote, they can do that. I would also encourage young people to, in addition to understanding how the election process works, like Mark has mentioned, sign up to work as poll workers, sign up to be canvassers, because this is exactly what folks want to happen, to scare people away from these roles. We're seeing that a lot of people are retiring. They're not doing this anymore because of the increased threats that are coming their way. And we need young people to step up and take those places to protect our democracy.
Excellent, excellent, and heard.
I think Chantal and Marques have raised amazing points, and I echo a lot of it. I think the critical piece for young people is to do intentional peer outreach. particularly to the people who are less likely to be engaged or less likely to vote. So in the 2018 midterms, and I think we share the sentiment that midterms usually don't get the glory that they deserve as much as the presidential election and everything that comes with that. So the midterm elections are usually kind of forgotten anyways. But particularly in 2018, only rural young people only made up 2% of those who voted in the midterm elections. And there was a lot of people who didn't cast votes. And that boils down to a number of different things. That is the digital equity and lack of access to online registration, lack of access to information about the candidates that I spoke about previously. Also issues of transportation to voting sites. In rural North Carolina, you can't necessarily walk a couple blocks down the street and get to where you need to go. You need a car. If you live far out in the county, you need a car to get to that voting site. And some people don't have access to that kind of transportation. Public transit is not fully available in those areas. Uber is not a thing in those areas. And so you need access to the voting site just physically as well. So I think a really critical thing that young people can do, especially young people that have greater privilege and have more advantage, is to be doing intentional peer outreach to say, let's carpool to the voting precinct. Let's figure out how we can get everyone there, to sharing information, if you have internet access and you can take screenshots of candidate information and send it to your friends who don't have reliable internet access, you're equipping them with information to then go and vote, an informed vote. Also to making sure that we are getting people, of course, the time to register has now passed, but to say, hey, let's all go register together. Let's all kind of register at one time, so that you are kind of pulling people along with you, especially those who may not have the same privileges and advantages to be able to be engaged the way that other young people are. My research background is adolescence and emerging adulthood. So I know for a fact that peer influence matters a lot. Scientifically, it matters a lot. And so if we lean on that and you young people work to pull along their peers in civic engagement, it can go incredibly far.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Again, I want to just give a warm shout out and thank you to all the young people, the students who are on the call from UNC Greensboro and North Carolina Central University. If I've missed anybody, please put it in the chat, because it wasn't my intention to miss anyone. I just see the familiar names and wanted to give a thank you for you all being engaged enough to join the call and get more information from the people who are out there making a difference and leading the organizations that are encouraging you to get out there and make your vote count and get more engaged. So we're running really close to our last 15 minutes of this call. So I wanted to give you all an opportunity, each one of the panelists, to summarize your information here today and give a kind of a final statement of what you do or what you would like for our listeners to hear, to encourage them to be more engaged civically or in leadership roles that are in their communities, to be able to give back, do more, or even connect with you in your organizations to do the same. So I'll just let you do a round robin to kind of summarize, and then we will open up the floor for any questions that anyone may have for any of our panelists or myself here on the call today.
I'm happy to kick off the closing statements. I would urge everyone who's here today to just keep rural North Carolina in mind when you're doing organizing and when you're considering civic engagement. North Carolina has the second largest rural population in the country behind Texas. And so our rural population is really powerful and holds a lot of power. They make up 78 counties. It's also important to remember that when you're doing that outreach and that organizing, there tends to be a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of stereotypes about who makes up rural North Carolina. And so it's important to understand that there are many counties in North Carolina that are in rural North Carolina that are made up of predominantly Black North Carolinians, predominantly Indigenous North Carolinians, predominantly Latin American and Hispanic North Carolinians. So it's important to know that when you're doing that outreach, that you can do really intentional outreach to communities that are often ignored, mostly because there's a misunderstanding of who makes up rural North Carolina. A lot of the issues that are close to rural voters' hearts are close to all our hearts. And so it is I would just urge everyone in the audience to remember rural North Carolina and the power they can hold when you're doing outreach regarding civic engagement.
Thanks, Leah.
I would just say that if you're not already a member of the ACLU, consider doing so. Our website is www.aclu.ofnc.org. I'm sorry. And just keep in mind that this is Martin Luther King's words, not mine. It's always the right time to do the right thing. And so I would encourage each of us to get involved if we're not already involved, figure out what that space you want to occupy is, find something that you are adamantly passionate about that protects the rights of North Carolinians, and lean into that thing.
Thank you, Chantal.
And I guess so in my closing words, a lot of times I talk about the fact that the people have power and try to reassure people that, you know, that we do have the power to make the changes that we need. It's not gone. And I think a group like this will probably understand that message more than most. And so, you know, I just ask that you deliver that message far and wide whenever you can, and live that message that, you know, that you do have the power. Don't live and allow ourselves to become disempowered and discouraged in these times. So that would be my journey, but a little twist I would put because of the group that's here. Again, I think you probably know these things. Is I would just open us up. This is something I say to myself a lot more too, is to try to figure out how we can listen to those that don't agree with us and figure out ways to try to stitch this democracy back together again. I think one of them, and I didn't talk about this, but one of the biggest problems in our democracy is this partisanship run amok, where the two sides are just getting further and further apart. And when when ideas aren't competing in our democracy, and when people aren't competing for votes or whatever, the democracy really isn't working at that point. And so it's going to take dialogue between people that disagree to try to find places where we can come together and move us forward in our democracy, move us forward as a country. And so I would encourage us that just as we don't lose our personal power and don't get discouraged by the gridlock, and walk in that power and that authority that you do have, also let's be mindful of ways that we can reach out to those that disagree with us. There are a lot of people that don't agree with me vehemently as far as my politics or whatever, that are good people on, you know, and are hurting, and they feel disempowered too. They feel not listened to whatever, you know. So both sides are kind of in this place where neither group feels the power that they have. And so figuring out ways to build those bridges, I think is going to go a long way in fixing some of the problems in our democracy. So that's what I would leave us with.
Thank you so much, Marques. Well, we are going to thank you all of you for being here and joining us. So we're going to open up the floor for questions for any of our panelists or myself about your civic engagement, questions that you may have about voting, questions that you may have about North Carolina politics and how you're impacted. I'm just going to open it up and see if anyone, you can by raising your hand in the reactions, or excuse me, taking yourself off mute and feeling free to ask a question if you would like. We've had some extremely powerful panelists here today, giving a lot of really good information. So we have one hand being raised, Mr. Raymond Hux. Yes, if you would like to take yourself off mute and ask your question.
Yes, I definitely came up here today, just did get the email, the invite, and I do want to become more involved, so that's why I decided to take the time to come up. I have one question for all of you, is, so on your organization's websites, do you have ways or lists, you know, where you want us to volunteer, that type of thing? Like, I'm from rural North Carolina. I mean, I live in the Raleigh-Durham area now, but I'm from down east. So Leah, I guess, how could I help, the rural areas if, I don't no longer live there too, so.
Excellent question, Raymond. Thank you for that. Would each of you or any of you like to address Raymond's question?
So definitely on our website, if you go to democracync.org, and there's a tab that says get involved, or how do we put it? I just was looking at, but take action, I think is the tab. And under that, there are several ways you can volunteer. One of the things that we're doing right now is what we call Vote Protector program. And so when people go and vote, they, if they have a problem voting or whatever, they might have to vote a provisional ballot or whatever. So they come out of the polling place a little bit discouraged. Well, we have people there in these yellow shirts and an 800 number that they can call. So if something went wrong while you were voting, the volunteer is there to say, hey, did you have a bad voting experience? What happened? And we get them, we have a hotline that they can call, and they have lawyers on the other end. And so that person can get advice from an election attorney to let them know what their rights are, what their next steps should be or whatever. So, and just it allows people to feel secure that they know what to do to make sure that their vote counts, or because sometimes if you had a bad interaction, you're like, them people lied to me, or them people didn't let my vote count, and you're upset. And so you need to talk to someone, an expert, that can say, okay, so, oh yeah, they were supposed to let you do this. Go back in there and get it right. We'll call the Board of Elections on our end and help you out. So anyway, so definitely that is a program. Several years we've had the largest one in the nation. I'm not sure if we will again this year, but it's something that helps a lot of people to vote. So that's one thing I definitely encourage you to help us out with, even in Raleigh, or definitely in a rural area.
We too have a take action button on our site. And so it lists a bunch of different things that you could take action on. And then once you do that, then you are on our mail-in list, and then we can start contacting you for other things, other ways to participate, other events you might want to sign up for as well.
Yeah, we are fortunate at the North Carolina Rural Center to have good relationships with a lot of local communities. And so the easiest way to get involved with us would be to connect with our Rural Counts advocacy team, who can connect you to different boots on the ground organizations in specific communities. I can drop the email address for that advocacy team actually in the chat, and you can reach out to them. We have an advocacy network, and they can absolutely connect you to whatever community you're interested in being engaged with.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. I want to get involved at some point into politics. So, I'm a business owner, so I'm pretty busy, but I know I got to start. So,
Yes, get out there and start. Leah has dropped the link in the chat box for everyone. And of course, visit the websites. The Institute as well has a ton of information on our website, and different things that are going on, different events that are going on with the different centers that we have. Check out what's going on at the institutenc.org to see how you can get involved and maybe take part in some of the programs that are getting involved in some of these things as well. All of these organizations, hopefully we all work really well together. We help one another when we have events such as these. And so we're all connected in some sort of way in which we are all here working for you in the community to get the things that you need. Any other questions? I see a couple of, I'm trying to monitor the chat box as well as admitting people. So if you have any questions, Trisha, you have a question? Trisha McCullers.
Hi, sorry I came in late, but so I know the election is coming up. I'm having difficulty like picking what's good for the community and stuff. Do y'all have like a list or like what people is actually, I guess, the politics, like what they actually are doing to serve the community as far as in, so I can make my decision as far as in that? Do we have any information on that?
That's a great question. So Democracy North Carolina. So we have voter guides that are specific to some counties, and then we have a statewide voter guide that is just our questions to the different candidates and their responses to us. You can find it at you can go to ncvoter.org, which is our kind of voter information website. So it's different than our Democracy NC. You can link to it, of course, from there, but it's called ncvoter.org. And that will have a link to those voter guides where you can see information about the different candidates. And that is something that I typically would ask a group like this. And of course, I'm taking questions, but I always like to know, like, how do you make those decisions? Where do you get the information about? One of the things that we've learned, or that I believe, is that one of the things that prevents more people voting is the lack of information. Like, and the lack of information, especially down ballot, about how do I know when in a Board of Education, contest, the difference between the two candidates. So that voter guide is there to help with that. So, so go check it out. And if you have any questions, you can always email us at demnc.org, elections@demnc.org.
And Marques, if you could put that email address in the chat box for questions, would be great. Thank you so much for that. Any other questions?
Well, I just want to respond to that really quickly. So we're a nonpartisan organizations, and you're going to find that a lot of organizations doing this work are nonpartisan, so they can't tell you how to vote. But what we can do is give you information so you can vote your values, basically. And so we have done, like Marques, we've done candidate questionnaires. So on the Supreme Court races, on a DA race in Forsyth, and a sheriff's race in Alamance, we've done candidate questionnaires. And so if you can try and find some of those candidate questionnaires, I know it's very murky and it puts the onus on the voter to try to find all of this information. So it makes it very difficult for you to know what people believe and what they're going to do when they're in office. It's very difficult, but wherever you can find that information, you want to see as much of those candidate questionnaires as you can, and make sure you're voting for people who are aligned with you, your values, and what you want to see happen in your state, in your county. That's just a little bit of advice I'd share.
Thank you, Chantal. And thank you for that question, Tricia. Are there any other questions? We are getting very close to our 12 o'clock mark and just trying to be aware of everyone's time and appreciative of all of your conversation and your listening ears and your engagement today. Did we have maybe one more question? Anyone? Well, I'm not a fan of putting anyone on the spot. So I always like to say the awkward silence is that everyone has been fed all of the nutrients and education that they need in a call. And if not that, then their stomachs are growling because it's pretty close to 12 o'clock. So I again want to thank by round of applause, thank all of my amazing panelists from all of these amazing organizations that are on the ground, as I say, doing the work and making it happen on a daily basis, making a difference in our lives, and whether we know it or not, and impacting our communities every day. Thank you all for what you do. Thank you for your whys. Thank you for being vigilant and working for us in the roles that you do on a daily basis. And thank you all, the audience, for being here today and engaging. Go out, get your early voters. Oh, one of the things I wanted to say is, could somebody give me the last day for early voting? Chantal?
November 5th.
November 5th. November 5th is the last day for early voting. Get out there, make it happen. Don't wait till the last minute. And election day is November the 8th, Tuesday, November 8th. But you can vote early up until November 5th. So go out there and get those numbers in, make your voice heard on paper, and then go in the community throughout the year and do the work. Thank you all so much again for joining the call. We look forward to seeing you again in our next town hall. Be on our website to see all of the upcoming events and webinars for engagement. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.